what effect does the nation's recent financial upheavals have on agriculture? I can't say I remember a day where I could leave my house with 25 cents in my pocket, buy my girlfriend an article of clothing, buy an all-American hamburger, and top off my gas tank at the end of the night with spare change in my pocket before I went home. Though my grandparents did experience those days, when you look back on these commodities, where do they root? They root in agriculture. Your clothes to wear, your food to eat, and fuel for transportation. And how have we seen these commodities shift with the current economy? Though they have increased since the days of my grandparents by natural inflation, I believe the current prices of agricultural commodities have been affected incredibly negatively by the poor economic state of our nation. American business can be very complicated, or it can be fairly simple. I prefer to keep it simple. So what do? I look back on fuel prices. Without fuel, the industry cannot transport livestock to the slaughterhouse, and then from there, transport the product to the grocery stores. And even before that, the livestock need feed. Without fuel, the feed trucks cannot get the feed to the cattle to be later transported to the slaughterhouse. Vets require it to care for animals day after day and move from property to property. You have swathers, combines, tractors pulling plows, and tractors pulling planters that require it on an annual basis. And from another off aspect, you have 56,000 people who need to get to one location in Kentucky for National FFA Convention, the largest agricultural meeting in the world. So it is apparent, with fuel prices up in a nation that is already $17 trillion plus in debt, agriculture as a whole becomes more expensive. Farmers must compensate for the loss and the cost due to fuel to finish their product, thus raising the price of beef, raising the price of crops, vet bills, farm equipment, and the cost of something as simple as a plane ticket. With these commodities now more expensive due to inflation, the consumer will suffer in the end. For me, the real question is, how can agriculturalists stop these upheavals in prices? Weld County, to me, is a perfect example. In these last several years, what have they done? They have drilled for oil and natural gas, making them prosper economically and utilizing resources close to home, allowing fuel prices to be sold cheaper to processing companies and less of an oil company expense before that. But we still face struggles. Here in Colorado, Governor Hickenlooper signs a farm energy bill, which in the end triples the cost for many farmers to pay for fuel and the cost of electricity on their properties on an annual basis. And you look on a larger scale, you have Capitol Hill, who has still failed to pass a farm bill, which again hurts agriculturalists in the end. And what does this lead to? This leads to events in Colorado like the 51st State Initiative, where we are completely divided by an agricultural community and the urban community. Agriculturalists are responsible for feeding this world and supplying them with commodities such as clothing and fuel. But how can we do that when we are divided so apparently by business and by the aspect of how we live our daily lives? As agriculturalists, we must be positive, and as my advisor says, practice advocacy. We must be educated, we must be proper, and we must educate those around us how we can lower these prices, lower the commodities for the consumer, and work side by side with the oil companies and other businesses to make our nation prosper as a whole. Thank you.
Reece, very good. You mentioned the farm.
Yes.
And a topic that I think is on the mind of a lot of agriculturalists as we need that to plan ahead. Some of the recent changes, are you familiar with the Farm Bill and
Yes.
how it's, some of the recent changes of the House split the nutrition side off of the regular farm bill. Is that good for agriculture? Will that help get it passed, or will that hinder it? What's your opinion?
I find it it's difficult to understand because in the past, many have seen the SNAP program for food stamps in the bill. The only reason that Congress managed to pass the entire farm bill with the energy grants and everything else it includes in it. And now that they've taken it out, because like you mentioned, the House was divided with the issue in June this year, because the Republicans saw that there was too much investment in family food assistance, and they wanted that out. And the Democrats, in general, wanted to keep that commodity in there. However, what ended up happening is they took it out, and it changed the name to the Food, Farm, and Jobs Bill. And as far as that affecting the agricultural industry, I'm one who believes in less need for welfare, but at the same time, I think we must find a happy medium to supply those who need it who need the welfare and those who don't. And I think its effect on agriculture leads more back to what is the cost to run those programs? Is it costing the farmers more to produce food, or is it a surplus? Which in general, the food stamps program, I believe, was originated off of a surplus of food, and what do we do with this, and how do we get it out to the hungry families in the United States? Well, we give them food stamps. So I think it is something that goes back and forth with the ag industry, but if we can focus on finding a happy medium, I think the ag industry will prosper economically, and the families who need that support will be just fine as well.
Reece, nice job. You mentioned the 51st state debate that Weld County and several rural counties had in this state. What were the major issues that brought that to the table, and if you were to debate what good that would have done if it were to have passed throughout the state, how do you think that would have helped the situation?
Agriculture helped.
In agriculture in general.
I believe that if the 51st state initiative had passed, that agriculture in Weld County in the eastern and southern part of the state would have prospered, because they have their priorities in drilling oil, making cheap resources, getting those commodities out at a reasonable price to make money. And I think as their own 51st state, they would have certainly prospered, because it is an agricultural area and they have their agricultural priorities. When you look back to Colorado as a state, once you have that agricultural portion that leaves, I believe they're going to suffer, because people forget that live in, urbanized areas such as Boulder and Denver and Colorado Springs along the Front Range. They forget where much of Colorado's economy comes from, and a big portion of it is agriculture. And I think they would see that it would suffer, and they would understand why agriculturalists are tired of not having a farm bill and tired of the new farm energy bill that makes them suffer financially. And I think you would definitely see a shift in success and failure between the two states.
Good job, Reece. One final question. You seem to be a proponent of the oil and gas industry. Well, there are some new laws that have been enacted past few months where they have certain setbacks of being able to drill oil and gas wells in certain areas because they have to be, say, 500 feet away from standing structure.
Right.
Well, some of that's going to put some of these new horizontal drilling methods they have will put these wells out into center of these fields, the farm ground.
Right.
How do you think that will affect the farmer's right to farm, and do you think it's a good proponent to keep going after drilling for that, even though it'll take some farm ground up eventually in the meantime?
As far as the oil companies moving in and taking up agricultural lands to put in the drills, that varies between benefit and loss, because you have many different oil companies in the area, and every oil company is different. Some of them, I've talked to farmers in the area, I've talked to my boss, and there's been experiences where the oil company comes in, they build a road, they maintain the road, they build up structures around it. They sometimes even, I've heard where they will level out certain areas in the fields, and it's great for the agriculture in the area, for the farmer and the rancher in the area. In other cases, I've heard instances where the companies are very poor with working with the farmers and the ranchers. They don't offer them very much financial benefit, and in some cases, they come in and they don't maintain a whole lot, and they don't provide a lot of incentive for the farmers. So it definitely varies, but I think if we can work together from a positive standpoint with the oil companies and farmers and ranchers, it could be very positive and very, very economically beneficial in the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.